All right, welcome to the July 10th, 2024 Regional Transportation Advisory Council meeting. My name is Stella Jordan. I'm the Public Engagement Program Manager at the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization. I will take us through some quick notices before we get started today. First, our notice of non-discrimination. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. You can read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.bostonmpo.org/mpo_non_discrimination. Our accessibility statement: this meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, or if you have any technical difficulties, please contact me, Stella Jordan, of MPO staff at sjordan@ctps.org at 857-702-3675 or via the Zoom chat box. And some guidelines for our meeting today: you will have joined the meeting with a muted microphone. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. Participants may mute and unmute themselves, but please do remain muted unless you're actively speaking. And to participate in the discussion, please select the raised hand function. You can find that by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with the raised hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar, and the chair will call on you. And I think Zoom may have changed a bit. People might have trouble finding the raised hand button. Please just find a way to let us know if you would like to speak and can't find it. We'll be looking out for that. And if you're joining by phone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand as well. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Len, for introductions.
Thank you very much, Stella. And for me, the interface I'm using, the raise hand buttons now is in like the React. It's on the React menu. It looks like a little heart. Means if you click that, then you see all the emojis, and at the bottom a raised hand. So hopefully that helps you. Even on the borderline, we got a nice attendance here. And so normally when we have about this many people, and I don't do intros, even though we have a bit of a padding this time. I think I'm going to stick with that this time. Let's say we get to the end of the meeting, and we have some extra time and people want to go around and introduce themselves. We can do that. That said, if the first time you speak, you care to introduce yourself, we'd appreciate it. So with that, I'm going to go to public comments. Have a public comment. Please try to raise your hand electronically. If you can't, just unmute your microphone and speak up. All right, I'm not seeing anything. You, Stella? Okay, great. Do we have a quorum? Kind of looks like we do. Okay, great. I saw you nod your head. So let's go ahead and get those April minutes approved. And so if you want to make any corrections, or comments on the minutes, please do so now. And if not, I'd love it if someone would make a motion to approve the minutes and then someone else second that motion.
Move to approve.
Thank you, John. I was just about to start begging, so I get someone to second it. Franny, Brad.
I actually didn't look at them, and so when I go to the agenda, I see some July. I don't know why it says July, because it's not July. I just want to make sure that I'm looking at that I open up the right minutes. So I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay. That's all right. That's
fine. I'm just looking on the calendar, and I see something that says 7/10, 2024, 7/10. Oh, and then after that, oh, what's the 710? After that, it says 410.
Yeah, sorry, that's sorry if our naming convention for files is a little confusing. It has to do with how we upload them. But
Okay,
basically 710 just means that's today's meeting. So
okay,
everything with that in front of it is for today. And then
oh,
the 0410 is corresponding to like what minutes they are for.
okay. I second.
Thanks. All right.
Thank you, Franny, because we know they're good. We know the minutes are good. And if we need to correct them a little bit afterwards, we can do that too. So thank you. So I have a motion made by John McQueen to approve the minutes and a second by Franny. Can we do a quick roll call, please?
Yes. Thanks, everyone. Len Diggins,
Yes.
Franny Osmond,
Yes.
John McQueen,
Yes.
Owen McDonald,
Yes.
Fred Mosley.
Yes.
Okay. I believe that is all of our members. That motion carries. Thanks, everyone.
Great, great, great. So, folks, before the headliner of the meeting, we have the Transportation Improvement Program before and after study. This has been many years in the making, and we've been looking forward to this for a very long time. And I mean, part of the interruption was due to the pandemic. I'm not going to say much more. I'm going to leave that to the person who's going to present it, and that's Sarah Philbrick and of the MPO staff. So. With that, Sarah, floor is yours.
Thanks, Len. Yeah, hi, my name is Sarah Philbrick. I'm the manager of MPO planning and policy. And I want to acknowledge that I did not write this study. Ryan Hicks, who was previously on my team, the CMP manager, was one of the main authors of the study, and unfortunately he has moved to a different position. So I'm happy to answer the questions you have today. I appreciate folks who sent their questions in advance, but if there's something that I do not know the answer to, I will make sure to follow up with you over email later on. This presentation was given to the board last month, and I'm happy to bring it to you all. And you have seen the presentation, but let's get started. Next slide, please. Yeah, thanks. So again, as I said, I want to acknowledge that this work started before the pandemic and long before my tenure at CTPS. So I'd like to thank those who crafted the bulk of this report: Ryan Hicks, William Kuttner, and Mark Abbott, all formerly of CTPS, and Julie Dombrowski, who also contributed substantially to the data analysis and now works for MassDOT. Next slide, please. So we score TIP projects based off of their potential benefits to ensure that projects the MPO is selecting for funding are supportive of the region's long-term goals. To further evaluate the efficacy of that scoring and selection in advancing the region's goals, the board and staff, in response from our federal partners through the 2019 certification review process, began discussing an approach to evaluating projects after they were completed. So in early 2020, before the pandemic, a project was conceived based off of the federal certification review to review the impacts of TIP projects through the congestion management process program. And so because of this origin through the CMP program, the project took an approach that used analysis and measures related to the CMP, things like traffic counts, using Synchro for the analysis, and crash data to carry on our before and after study. This analysis provides some insight into built projects, but doesn't really take account into other critical measures of success, such as like health benefits or usability or mode shift. So the report contains probably, I would say, an incomplete assessment of the 4 projects selected. With that said, I'm going to go through the results of this study, and then I'd like us to use some time in the discussion to think through ways that we might want to do before and after studies in the future, as this is something we're talking about internally. So for this project, we reviewed 4 TIP-funded projects: the Lebanon Street reconstruction in Melrose, Hancock and East-West Quantum Streets in Quincy, the reconstruction of Broadway in East Somerville, and the community path extension in Somerville. Overall, I would say that the results are fairly mixed. All projects indicated some benefits, but don't always meet the intended goals. go on to the next slide, please. So I want to start by briefly going over the Lebanon Street reconstruction in Melrose. There were a number of problems indicated for this area before reconstruction. The curbing was damaged and sidewalks were cracked. The accessibility features were non-compliant. There was no defined shoulder for bicycles. Lind and Grove Streets were really close together, causing confusion for folks turning. There were excessive queues at the intersection of Lebanon and Upham Streets and a lack of turn lanes throughout the quarter. Next slide. So this slide shows a picture of before the construction in 2014 and then after reconstruction in May 2016. Some of the changes are hard to see from above, but you can notice some more pronounced markings, better crosswalks, an increase of bike and pedestrian facilities, so a shoulder for bikes and sidewalks, and then also a more defined difference between the streets with the expanded of the triangle, so that it's easier to know what street you're going onto when you turn. Next slide. Another photo of the reconstruction before in 2014 and after. And again, making sure that we have better pedestrian and bike access, especially adding these sidewalks. Next slide. So the evaluation in the report looked at 3 distinct categories, primarily safety, traffic flow, and urban design. Next slide. We found a decrease from 73 to 58 crashes in the project area. Most of this was due to a decrease in what were classified as angle crashes from 31 to 12. Delays increased in about half the intersection study, largely due to a left turn movement on Main Street southbound. But signal timing changes, in addition to growing demand, likely led to an increase in that congestion. Roadway surfaces for bicycles and pedestrians were greatly improved, although we didn't do any counts of bike and ped users in that intersection. Next slide, please. So looking at Hancock and East-West Quantum Streets in Quincy, these again are the problems that were identified before construction. There were long delays and congestion for all approaches during peak periods. Crash experiences were greater than the state average in this intersection. There was no signal coordination, no provision for bicycles, and very long pedestrian crosswalks. Next slide. This slide has a photo of before construction in 2014 and after construction in 2016. You can, the difference between the 2 photos shows a lot of turn lanes added to make turning in the 4-way intersection easier, as well as shortened crosswalks and improved crossing, especially in the northern part of this photo. Next slide. Again, the study evaluates improvements to this area in 3 main categories: safety, traffic flow, and urban design. Next slide. Crashes actually increased by 20% in this study area. We think largely changed on, we also look specifically at North Quincy High School, which is close to a McDonald's, to see if the crashes changed in that subpart of the intersection as well, and crashes remain largely unchanged there. Fortunately, we don't have traffic counts of the before data, so we don't know if crash rates have increased, but the number of crashes did increase by 20%. There were a lot of changes in this study area between the before period and the after period. One of them being that the MBTA added another entrance to the Red Line station, which sort of rerouted traffic to go different ways in this intersection. There was also an addition of a new Target and Starbucks, which likely contributed to increased eastbound traffic. And we noticed a challenge both before and after the reconstruction that accommodating vehicle drop-off and pickup at the nearby schools is really a challenge and causing a lot of congestion. Next slide. For the third TIP-funded project in this study, we looked at the Broadway reconstruction in East Somerville. The goals were to reduce the capacity of travel lanes, change parking use and regulations, and widen sidewalks and bike lanes. So essentially, this was a major throughput area in Somerville that's no longer needed as a major travel lane or major travel corridor. And so instead, this project was designed to make that more of a boulevard and more friendly for folks, walking and biking and rolling, and to make sure that cars weren't allowed to go very fast. So next slide. This is the area before construction in 2010, and the next slide shows after construction. It's hard to see some of the changes at this level because so many of them were made to the urban landscape, but you can see a median was added to separate the lanes going eastbound and westbound, and trees were added, sidewalks were expanded. Next slide. This picture shows some loading zone signage that was added through this reconstruction as well, trying to change some of the parking regulations to be accommodating to commercial uses, and also to lessen some of the parking that had crowded the street in the past. Next slide. So I would think that this project is one of the more challenging ones to evaluate with the criteria we had for this study, partially because so many of the changes were at the person level scale and really about what it feels like to walk down that street. And so the data that we collected in terms of traffic flow and crash rate tells one part of the story, but not necessarily the whole thing. Go to the next slide, please. There was a decrease from 55 to 31 crashes in the project area, and crashes with injuries decreased from 16 to 7. There was also a decrease in vehicles of through traffic between 2007 and 2023 in the AM peak. We also wanted to make sure that because there was a decrease in vehicles on Broadway, that there wasn't significant diversions away from Broadway between McGrath and Lombardy Street that would inversely impact that area. And our counts indicate that there was no significant diversions. Next slide. And the last project that was studied in our before and after study this time around was the community path extension in Somerville. The goals for this project that was completed in 2016 were to expand the shared use path from Alewife to Leashmere and to complete a portion of the 104-mile Central Mass Rail Trail. So this is sort of a missing link in that connection. Next slide. We have some photos that show what the rail right of way looked like in 2001 compared to what the community path in that same location looks like today. So previously not being used for mobility reasons, and now we have a community path that's used for all sorts of uses. Next slide. Another picture of the right of way east of Cedar Street in 2001, and then what that looks like in 2020. Next slide. So in this study, the improvements in this area were really looked at in terms of level of use. I would say design was a small part of that. Next slide. We counted about 1,300 users in a 12-hour period on March 23rd, 2023. Back in 2003, to create this project, they created a projection and estimated about 1,800 users. I was pretty impressed with how accurate that projection 20 years ago was. The community path has successfully connected areas of Somerville to the Green Line and continues to be used. So that is one marker of success. Next slide. So while roadway safety was prioritized in all of the projects that we looked at, our crash statistics show improvement for some, but not all locations. I think there's a need for more frequent, quick analyses of TIP funded projects to make data-driven funding decisions. This project, due to its heavy data-driven nature and some of the more technical analysis that were done, took a really long time. Part of that was also staffing changes in the pandemic, but the project started in early 2020 and just wrapped up this past year. So if we want to be doing more of these studies in the future, I think there's a need to think about the ways that we want to do these studies and the metrics that we want to show as being of what success looks like. Next slide. As I just mentioned, I think there's a need for both a robust analysis like this one and a more nimble analysis of TIP funded projects. The MPO should identify performance metrics and data that it needs in advance of project construction to be able to track progress after construction. And there's a need to systematically review project outcomes to their scoring criteria to see if our projects are actually working towards the region's goals and doing the things that we thought it would do when we decided to fund it. So those are all of the slides I have today. I have a few questions that I was given in advance. Len, I'll leave it up to you whether or not you want me to go through some of those or have folks ask me questions now.
Len, it looks like, had to jump out and is just coming back in. I think his internet was a little unstable today. So if you have maybe some questions that you want to dive into first.
Sure.
that would be fine.
Yes. So we got some questions in advance. One of them is really questioning how many years have we been doing this type of evaluations? And do all projects that are completed under the TIP process evaluated? I don't know if I know all of the information to this question, but I can give the history that I do have. So this project, as I mentioned in the beginning, was born out of the 2019 certification review and started in early 2020. So this is the only study we've done since then. I did find a study published in 2010 for the MBTA as a before and after study of the Greenbush commuter rail, which is also on our website. But we have not been doing consistent before and after TIP evaluations in the past 20 years at least. Another question that came in was about the cost of these projects and if the values in the study reflect the total cost at the end, like the final delivered cost of a project. So in the study, I didn't show it in the slides, but we showed the initial estimated cost and then the bid amount, which often was larger. We don't have the total number of dollars that were spent at the end of the day, partially because the TIP is not obligated to fund all of that. So we know whatever like TIP money we gave out, and there might have been changes as needed. But if costs jumped up during construction, and it was past the TIP process, we likely would not see that cost increase come in. I'll do one more question we got in advance and then I can open the floor to other questions. So one of the questions we got was about how planners are able to be nimble or respond to changing land use or demographics. I think the Quincy example is a pretty good show of that we had a change in the entrance to the Red Line station. We also had some changes in the land use there. Any project that comes to us through the TIP is already at 25% design, which has some rigidity to it. The project likely can't change much once it's been funded, but we try to work with municipalities and MAPC and their like data their database of projected development or development that's been permitted but not in construction yet, to help municipalities plan for the future and sort of recognize the changes that are anticipated in the neighborhoods that they're building these construction projects in, and try to figure out how they can adapt, how they can be planning for the future when they put the project in from the beginning. But then once the project's funded, we don't work a lot with municipalities to be nimble to some of those changes. All right, I'm going to leave it there and then open it up for questions from folks on the call right now.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm having some connectivity issues. So my signal dropped me about, I would say 5 minutes ago, maybe 7 minutes ago, and it was gone for about 2 minutes. So I missed a little bit, but I'm also saying this so that Stella knows this. If I am not responsive, meaning I'm probably not available, so she will carry on until I'm back connected. So with that, I will turn to John McQueen.
Hi, thank you. Again, to that Quincy mess. Is it possible, I guess, given the rigidity at 25% design, that, there is clearly time that goes on and projects that get approved that are peripheral to that confound it. For instance, Target, plus a lot of residential, and I think even some of the state buildings along Hancock in the north end are in there. But I think the Target adds another sense of another type of traffic. It would draw, let's say, more regional traffic than local traffic that had been the case. And also there were a lot of changes going on at the southern end of Hancock in the downtown central business district area, whole rehab and reconstruction. When factors like that kind of come up, can they be, if you're listening to municipal government, can they serve to just postpone the TIP project when there's significant changes like that really are going to affect the outcome, which I think they may have done, and especially when there are takings involved that are really kind of affecting a neighborhood and such that are very significant. Would it have made sense to push that project back and get more information, more collaboration with the municipality in terms of what the hell their zoning board is approving and such? Just a question. It just seems as though a lot changed underneath the surface that really confounded the original design or intent, as we saw with the lack of safety performance.
Yeah, I will actually turn this over to Ethan. From my understanding, it would be up to the municipality to decide if they wanted to postpone the project or, come back and say they wanted to change the design. We wouldn't necessarily be involved in that process unless the municipality came to us. But Ethan, can you confirm if that's correct?
Yeah, so as Sarah just said, it really does depend on whether or not the municipality would like to see that kind of readiness change made to the project, because it may have an impact on their ability to obtain design funding, and of course there's a knock-on effect as to when the project can get constructed. There is precedent for this. This was not the case in this project, but for example, this past TIP development cycle, there was a project on Boylston Street in Fenway, in Boston, of course, and the city of Boston actually requested that the project be delayed back 1 year out of federal fiscal year 25 into federal fiscal year 2026 to accommodate a new development that's going in at the Boylston and Park Drive intersection that's right there, which some folks may have seen in the news. So when the municipality wants to see that delay, MassDOT and of course their project managers and MPO staff will work to accommodate it. But again, the municipality is the project proponent. It's really up to them when it comes to that.
Is it? I guess would question in this case, and you probably have some more history on this, maybe not you personally, Ethan, but there was just a whole lot going on, and I know that Quincy was desperate for, you know, getting Fed funds and things like that for a lot of the changes that were going on. But would it have made sense in retrospect for, given if there was strong collaboration and reconnaissance going on between the two, between MassDOT and the municipality, if MassDOT really sensed that there was some confounding zoning or things like that going on with the project area, could they have inserted themselves in this and just said, we're going to postpone you, versus it being up to the municipality?
Generally speaking, so in a present day situation, that's what would go on. This is kind of a could have, would have, should have
Yeah.
situation.
Well, it's a
So,
learning experience, I guess.
yeah, going forward, this is something that even as part of the MPO's own project evaluation scoring criteria, we look at all developments planned in a project area when we look to fund the project, and we try to consider the extent to which the project may accommodate that, especially with regard to things like housing production of late. So that's a consideration for the MPO. I'm sure it's a consideration for MassDOT as well. Something, you know, in the past is kind of moot at this point because the project has been completed. And a future project may seek to address that.
Thank you.
Alrighty, thanks, John. Logan?
Yeah, thanks, Len. Logan Casey, Sustainability Coordinator for the Town of Marblehead. Sarah, thank you so much for the presentation. And this has just been a really interesting study. You know, I think just in general, I think it's great to get more background on the TIP projects after the MPO has kind of done these and done the construction, and just getting a better idea of what our impacts are, whether positive or negative, I think is always useful, and I don't think has been, you know, really done in the past, as Sarah earlier noted. But I had to step away from the conversation in the beginning, so this might have been answered already, but Sarah, would you mind elaborating on what the decisions were that went into kind of deciding the metrics that were kind of used in this study?
Yeah, I can give the information I know off the top of my head, but I might have to dig a little bit more. So, because of the federal certification review suggesting that this be part of the CMP program, it was sort of handed off to the congestion management program, and there's a lot of examples and guidance from FHWA about like how a before and after analysis could be conducted through a congestion management process. And they do include metrics such as, you know, level of service, crash data, AM and PM, like peak, excessive delay, things like that. And that's very useful for us to know for some of these projects, but for other projects and going forward, I don't think those are the metrics we're most interested in, given the MPO's current goals and objectives. So one thing that we're thinking about, and I'd love to hear from you all, is sort of like, what should we be measuring success around? Because I think for this project, the question to start wasn't what success do we want to see? It was more like, what metrics do we have that can show change? And it wasn't, the outcome wasn't thought about as much as the process, or like following the standard set of CMP performance measures.
Well, I think you I think you answered what I was about to ask as my next point of kind of what the future metrics might look like. And you know, I think I think one interesting point that I think would be interesting to study is greenhouse gas emissions, saved or, might be emitted because a project is constructed or not constructed, evaluating the metrics of that and maybe using that to promote more mode shift, road diets, trying to get us closer to our net zero greenhouse gas emissions goal by 2050. I think that's also would be very interesting to talk about with, like the MPOs, goal setting that they do with SAM. And I know, I'm not sure what stage you guys are at with, setting a greenhouse gas emissions goal, or if that's been sued in our government yet and not moving anymore. But, I think like trying to measure the environmental impacts of, the MPO's projects would be really important. But also I think another factor is just, and I think, John's kind of questions and comments kind of touched on this earlier, but what are the metrics? What are, when we get the outcome of these metrics, kind of what is the MPO looking to do with that? And I think it'd be interesting to evaluate a little bit more, what those metrics would play in at a project that is at, that 25% that is ready for ready to start being identified for construction is, kind of advanced to a point where, a municipality has already put in, quite a bit of, time, effort, and capital into kind of starting design, and, getting to the MPO process where, maybe those metrics don't play out in the longer term MPO goals. I I would hate for a municipality to be in that situation where they might have to restart. So also considering like maybe how to intervene and make sure that, the projects that, are being proposed, by municipalities, make sure they meet the MPO's goals and are communicated well in advance of kind of applying for that, construction funding at that 25% stage. And, maybe the design pilot is a good spot to start with that. But yeah, I'll get off the soapbox. Thank you.
No, thanks for that, Logan. I think a few things that you said resonated. I'm actually working with Sam for the performance-based planning program and Judy for the resilience and air quality program right now to figure out if there are ways that we can measure changes in air quality due to TIP funded projects. So we're looking into different air quality sensors that are out there and if they would be sensitive to like intersection level changes, congestion level at our scale. Because that is something we're really interested in. Like, can we actually see a change in air quality because of some of the TIP funded projects we're doing? I think in terms of what are we looking to do with these metrics, I think one of the things is to know if our criteria is actually funding things that have the impact we think they'll have. And the other is helping project proponents make their proposals the best they can be. So I know this is something that Ethan has worked on with with municipalities who put into projects, this past year. But if they submit something that looks really good in a lot of ways, but say is missing resiliency elements that they think they could add to make their project both score better and meet our goals better, we can actually meet with them and talk to them about ways to change the project to make it better. So if we know to do that early on in the process, that's much easier than trying to get changes later after the project's been funded.
Thank you. Franny?
I keep thinking whether my question was answered. It pretty much was. I was sort of wondering what the big steps forward from here would be. Thank you for the presentation, and I'm really glad you're looking at these. And I was just hoping that the lessons, like the things that either couldn't be studied because the data wasn't taken, and you sort of addressed that, that the data is included in evaluations in the future, and to be able to tell people as they're applying, you're putting in this element was something that didn't seem to improve. You know, really, really vocalizing the lessons from this so that they don't just disappear into a pile of studies, and that they inform the next studies would be really helpful.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think there's a few step forwards that I can think of that we're talking about internally just as a result from this study. So one is, what metrics do we want to make sure we're collecting before construction so that we can actually see a difference? Because if we don't collect before, we can't see change. And so there's already some studies, you know, we plan out 5 years, so we know what we're funding for the next 5 years. We can be collecting that data now to make sure that we're able to have before and after going forward. So one of them is thinking through, like, what are the metrics and things that we want to be able to compare today versus, you know, 5 to 10 years from now. The other, I think, big step forward that we're thinking about is making sure that we're collecting some sort of data on every TIP project. So this study was large, expensive, took a long time, and we only looked at 4 projects. And so if there are pretty standard metrics we can easily capture for all of our projects, that just gives us more data to work with going forward. Not every TIP funded project needs this level of analysis, and if we can get something at a high level view, then we can decide which projects to dig into a little bit more. So those are some of the things we're thinking about changing going forward. I think there's also a need to collect data on the projects, on all of our projects once they're constructed, because there are sometimes, you know, we approve them, we give them money at 25% design, they get completed, and they actually look a little bit different than they did at 25% design. And we don't always know that unless we're like familiar with the area or familiar with the planner. And so that's something we're also talking about, is how do we close the loop on all these projects so we know exactly what was constructed and how it relates to the way that we scored the projects.
Thank you.
I guess that lends itself to whether or not we rescore it later on. I know they get admitted 25%, but we could potentially consider rescoring when they get to 75%. That may not affect whether or not it wouldn't affect whether we fund it. We generally are committed to funding the projects once they're in the TIP, but it could change the way we assess the project later on. But I'll come back to that later. The sequence of hands I have here are Logan and then John. Is that correct? Logan?
Was first. John, you can go first if you want.
Okay, thanks. To the Quincy example again, if we're having safety as a measurement, or as an objective rather, it really boils down to data points of things like crashes that have to be collected. And I guess it comes into question back, in that era, with 2014 or so, how accurate was the crash data back then versus we're probably a little more mindful of it now, and collecting it. It's become more systematic. I think it's varied from town to town, even in terms of in areas, stations of a police department, which would qualify maybe in Quincy. But another complicating factor was I sensed that there was a conflict of objectives, that we had a safety issue, obviously, but it seemed as though it was passed over in favor, let's say, of a level of service issue. That level of service maybe diminished, became more of a priority and capacity in that section versus some of the safety aspects. I mean, they did a lot of the basic sensible geometry changes for pedestrians. Again, the bicycles, really, I don't think were addressed that strongly. And secondly, if they really wanted to compromise level of service for safety, they possibly could have had on-demand RFBs at some of those critical intersections, especially where they had so much jaywalking and mid-block crossings historically from the high school. So it seems as though the objectives were compromised in that, and I guess I'd put blame on some of the municipality for maybe not being as diligent on that, because they had a lot of projects, big projects going on that were taking a lot of their attention. So anyway, that's just a comment.
Yeah, thanks,
John.
John. I mean, to the point of crash data, I guess, you know, we take our crash data from police, and if
Right.
they change the way that they classify the data, I don't know that for Quincy Police Department in particular. But I wouldn't imagine that the data from 2014 would be very different than it is now. Maybe the ways in which crashes are classified, but typically, like, if the police are called and it's a crash, it's a crash. There
I thi-
are obviously crashes that are not classified because the police are not called, but
I think at that point in time, let's say in the first decade and a half of 2000, we were finding, I guess, in livable streets and Walk Boston, Walk Massachusetts, that the collection of crash data was spotty at best in terms of the reliability from to town or things like that, whether it was a baseline that could evenly be applied as fact, you know, from town to town, or in terms of judging or setting objectives. It has been more emphasized, I think, more recently in the last decade and a half to get better collection, more even collection. So I think that's an issue, but again, that's the metric that would need to be, I guess, a pre-post for any project. If safety is your prime, which probably should be an objective versus either level of service or congestion management.
yeah, I do think too that the Vision Zero action plan that we're putting together now is really taking a close look at all of the crash data around the region and trying to come up with like a very standard base of what safety looks like in our region right now and ways to track it going forward. So you know, I can't speak to the data in 2014, but I know that we're working a lot now to find different ways that we can figure out what the picture of safety looks like today so we can track changes going forward.
Great, thank you. So go back to Logan and then Fred.
Yeah, thanks. So for the future of like the tip before and after studies, how do you think this work is going to be conducted at the MPO? Do you think it's going to be like another EPWP kind of funded study, or do you think like this could be integrated into like regular work or reporting that the MPO does, like through the tip scoring process or some other process, I guess?
That's a really good question that I think we're still working out. My vision would be that there is some level of metrics that is integrated into our regular work so that we have some basic metrics for all projects. But then if we were to do a more advanced study like this, or wanted to do Synchro, or really wanted to drill down into turning movements, that would probably be a discretely funded study. But that doesn't mean that we can't be collecting data on all of our projects ongoing, either through our TIP funding or our performance-based planning funding or some other like ongoing work that we already do.
I'll step in and say, I think you'll probably need to become a program. And I hesitate to say that though, because if it's simply a program, it'll probably come out of the CTPS budget, and I think we could then perhaps kiss any discrete studies goodbye. That'll be like it. We only have $150,000 for discrete studies as it is, and that would probably take all of that. So I think I would like to see, the MPO board, much like we have like the technical assistance program, or the design assistance program, you maybe set aside in $1 million a year or something. For that, which will then become a program, that is, of course, conducted by the staff. May even need to hire, more staff in order to do it and to systematically do the gather the before data, and of course do the after data, but do it in a very systematic way that takes everything that we do into account and then prioritize how we do it. So with that, Fred.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to circle back on John's comment or question on the accident data. The state's made a lot of strides in the last 2 or 3 years on improving the data for that's been collected for accident. I know one of the weak points was the location. So they've got a lot more location information. So I think you'll see, compared to 2015, 2016, data that we're looking at now, 2022 and 2023, I think is coming on shortly, it is a lot more reliable, a lot more detailed, and actually will turn up more accidents than we had seen in the past. So I think we are definitely making strides in the profession as far as documenting accident history better.
That's interesting. So you're saying that we'll see more crashes. It's not necessarily due to the crashes that we're having more crashes. It's that we're documenting more crashes. Is that what you're saying, Fred?
Yeah, exactly. In the past,
Okay.
I think sometimes we would say, well, we can't rely on this information. We don't know where it is.
Right.
And the data it's just getting better. So we're really, there's more information on what's going on, and we can pinpoint more cause and effect sometimes.
Right. Okay, great. I have some technical questions, but maybe since I missed part of the end of your presentation, Sarah, did you answer the question that I had posed about what does projected mean?
No, I haven't, but I'm happy to do that now. So in the functional design report, there is a projected, which is usually it's usually about 20 years in the future with the build. So I know one of your questions is that mean like that this was built or the no build. So projected is usually what we think will happen in this area 20 years after this project is built.
Okay, all right, good. And so, because I know one of the part of the narrative, I think it was for the Quincy study. It did refer to the no build, and I think the no build data is in Appendix B. So my suggestion is that when you do more of these, that you also include the no build, so that you get to have that kind of comparison. And also, I saw that in the build, they were going out 20 years, and we're doing the study though. A number of years before the conclusion. So I don't know if we are simply saying, especially when we are seeing negative results, that we would expect a linear decrease or increase, depending on the metric, from point whatever year the project's completed to the end of completion, because I could imagine confounding factors coming in that wouldn't resolve themselves until the end of the study or the end of that period, when the end of the build period. And I don't know to what extent the modeling is taking that into account. So that's all I have to say on that. And a lot of other technical questions, I'll circle back to you by email or whatever to answer those. So John, did I see your hand?
Yeah, back to Fred's point, I think that's good to hear. I was partially aware, somewhat aware that significant improvements are being made throughout the data collection system on crashes. More emphasis on that. That'll be good. I guess when we're doing any kind of pre-post and you get to a point where it's felt that the data collection is much more thorough than other decades, let's say, that period of time should be asterisked in terms of its reliability, I suppose, that just something to think about. But I guess back to the Quincy thing, back to the compromise or conflict of objectives, I guess, where they really had level of service as important, but it really compromised safety. I think that's shown by what the takings, they widened the footprint of the roadway. Okay, I believe, didn't they? It showed, I think, a wider area, which I think would promote more throughput and possibly speeds, if that was, because there were takings that were involved. And those weren't just for the crosswalk on the western side, the McDonald's side.
Okay.
But I think that was something that was a factor that might have compromised the safety figures.
Okay, so Owen?
Yes, unfortunately, I've been called away from this a couple of times, but just to point out with regard to the Quincy situation, I live about 3/4 of a mile away from there. There was concern expressed, I believe, correct me if I didn't hear you correctly, John, but about the jaywalking between the high school and the McDonald's. Just wanted to point out that as part of this project also, there was a fully signalized crosswalk included directly between the high school and the McDonald's as part of the project. Just wanted to point that out.
Right, thank you.
Thanks.
So I have a question regarding the future project recommendations. So have the municipalities been made aware of these recommendations?
Sorry, do you mean the recommendations of looking at projects in the future?
So like starting in section 6.2, meaning there are specific recommendations for Quincy, Melrose, Somerville, the Broadway, and the community path. And so I know they could read this. They could read this. And that's one thing. But I guess so. I guess there's two parts to the questions. To what extent were these recommendations being done in collaboration with the municipalities, like the planners, and to the extent it wasn't, then to what extent have they been made aware of these?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think they were made in collaboration with the municipalities. I know we have talked to Somerville about the results of the study. I don't believe we have had a meeting with Quincy or Melrose.
So, I think a lot of the recommendations are very good. Some I think are things that they can do on their own. Some they might need some assistance, but I think perhaps follow through could be something that would be part of the MPO's kind of mandate when it comes to the projects that we fund. We can circle back to them, do the after, and then if there are recommendations that are maybe a little pricey, we work with the communities, to municipalities, to design those, and then get those in the tip, maybe on a higher priority basis. That could be part of the criteria by which we score projects. So just thinking a lot about how to do what benefits to get out of the before and after. That could be all part of the 3C aspect, the comprehensive notion of it, the cooperative notion of it, and the continuous aspect of it. So, all right, well, we're at 3:30, man. So I think we've burned into 5 of the 10 minutes of slack that we had. And so if there is a burning comment or question from someone, we'll take one more and then we will thank Sarah for the first time. Okay, I'm not seeing anything. And so we're going to thank Sarah for the second time. And I really appreciate this presentation, entertaining all our questions, and I'm sure we'll be in touch more. All right.
Great,
Take
thanks,
care.
Len.
You're welcome. So on to the next item on the agenda, which is the presentation by Stella and our own Stella on the public engagement plan update. Stella?
Thanks, Len. And hello again, everyone. I am going to be talking a little bit about some planned updates to our public engagement plan today. So just to get us started, I am sure we are all well versed in the ins and outs of the public engagement program at this point, but I wanted to just give a bit of background. Public engagement is, of course, one of the core functions of an MPO, and we want to make sure that the transportation planning work that we do reflects and responds to public priorities and needs, and that all members of the public have ample opportunities to get involved and share their perspectives. So we have a set of federal regulations relating to public participation, and the Public Engagement Plan, or PEP, as we call it for short, is one of the core documents that MPOs are required to produce in order to essentially outline how we're meeting those regulations and conducting our public engagement activities. So the PEP covers the full range of opportunities for members of the public to shape the transportation planning and decision-making process in our region. It serves several purposes, including describing and guiding the MPO's public engagement program, including program activities and best practices, describing and guiding the MPO's efforts to offer continuous and meaningful opportunities for members of the public to influence decision-making, and outlining the MPO's public engagement vision, guidelines, and principles for achieving effective engagement. And as with our other core documents that you're familiar with, like the TIP and UPWP, the PEP is reviewed and endorsed by the MPO board, including our federal partners. So updates follow a public process to allow opportunities for members of the public and other stakeholders to provide feedback. We're still at a really early stage in this update, so we're engaging the advisory council right now at this early stage, really to provide additional opportunity to hear some advice from you all as we think about the design and content of these updates. And of course, we'll keep you updated on the timeline and seek advice at key points as we continue to finalize the new PEP. So what does the PEP currently look like? The current PEP was endorsed by the MPO board in 2021 and last revised in September 2022. These 2022 revisions weren't super extensive. They mainly were focused on two things: changing terminology from outreach to engagement, and better describing some procedural norms around public review periods. We're not required to update the PEP on any specific sort of timeline or regularity, but a lot has changed since 2022. So the PEP currently includes information about the Boston Region MPO, the role of the engagement program and our approaches to engagement, and opportunities for members of the public to participate in our work. It also contains details about our federal requirements for public participation and how we are meeting them. And to accompany the current PEP, staff had also developed a PEP guidebook, which is a product designed for members of the public who want to learn more about engaging in the regional transportation planning process. It's basically like an executive summary of the PEP, if I could call it that, really aimed at providing a more accessible and easy to engage with document for understanding the public engagement program and process. And here I just want to spend some time outlining some of the changes that we know we want to make. Of course, there's still a lot of planning happening, so there's always room to adjust these, but we're essentially planning a pretty broad update to the current PEP, or a rewrite. So we want to update the design and layout to make both the PEP and the guidebook more visually engaging products. And we also have a broad variety of content update plans. So some of these are to bring the PEP into better alignment with the Destination 2050 LRTP. As I said, a lot has changed since 2022, including us having a new long-range plan and new vision and goals. So we want to make sure that the PEP reflects that, as well as updates that have happened to the public engagement program itself over the last couple of years, including the formalization of our program, our team, our practice area, as well as the incorporation of new activities and processes such as evaluation and reporting, which you've been hearing a bit about from me as well. So for the past few months, we've been taking a look at peer agency public engagement plans. We've been drawing a lot of design, structure, and outline inspiration from other transportation organizations. And one thing that we found is that a lot of the more recently produced public engagement plans were more visual, more intentionally branded, and used engaging graphical elements such as icons and infographics to convey information. If you look at our current PEP document, that is not the case. So in updating our PEP, we hope to not only create a plan that is reflective of our program's goals, but really is visually engaging as well. So we're trying to take some of these elements as inspiration for our own update. And particularly, we want to make sure that our products are accessible for audiences who may not be as familiar with transportation planning. So what we're planning is to create 2 separate documents along the lines of what we have now with the PEP and the guidebook, but we're going to be a little bit more intentional about the separation between the two. So the PEP document itself will be intentionally updated as more of an internal resource, whereas the guidebook will be updated as more of a public-facing product. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. In terms of timing, we'll be working on these updates over the next few months. And we're planning to present to the MPO board and request that the PEP be released for a public review period in September. That timeline, of course, is subject to change, but that is what we're aiming for right now. So to talk a little bit more about these 2 products and what we're planning for the update, as I mentioned, we're looking to update the PEP as really more of an internal product. What we're aiming for here is primarily to have something that's more of a resource for staff and for partner agency stakeholders that has guidance on our public engagement program, practices, and strategies, and details about program activities such as the Advisory Council and the Community Planning Lab. So basically outlining the things that we do, why we do them, how we do them, all of that good detail, which I think can be a bit overwhelming if you're not as familiar with the process. And we'll keep information in the appendices as well of the PEP document about our federal requirements, as similar to what's in there currently, as well as add details about the processes that we've developed to meet and exceed these requirements. And these should serve, again, as really just a useful reference and resource regarding both regulatory compliance and also best practices for staff who are looking to implement or expand engagement activities, and for our partners and interested stakeholders to learn more about the details of our process and practices. And then the guidebook will really be a more robust public-facing product with information about the MPO that's really easy to digest, the type of work we do, and obviously how to get involved with it in all of the various forums and practices that we offer for public involvement. So at this point, I want to sort of open it up. I'm happy to answer more questions about the PEP. I mean, obviously, I want to reiterate that we are still very early in this process. And I think one of the things that we're really hoping to hear from you all is, like, as people who at one point came to the MPO without much of an understanding of what we did, and then gradually learned about our process enough to engage in the robust way that you're doing now via the Advisory Council, you know, what helped you get to this point? What key information about the MPO and participation was really helpful for you as you were learning how to engage or learning what type of work we do? And, you know, what information would you feel is really critical that we convey through particularly the public-facing document, the PEP guidebook that we're planning to make? How can we make it as accessible and engaging as possible for all audiences? And of course, also open to any other comments about things that you'd like to see here or things that you'd like to hear more about the program, things that I should keep you updated on.
I'll quickly jump in and say that this could be good questions for the first iteration or the first cohort of the Community Planning Lab. If not the first, then maybe the second or something, so just an idea, but I see AC Rose's hand up. AC, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, sorry I'm late. And now I already forgot what I was gonna, oh, I was going to ask you, like, I can't remember what drew me in, but when you say public engagement program, when you say you want to broaden it, is it to more organizations like this that are generally interested in transportation, or anybody?
Yeah, you mean like broadening sort of who we're doing outreach to or who we're trying
Yeah.
to engage? Yeah, I mean, I think our program is very focused on the public and public engagement, and I think we're looking at that in a pretty broad sense, but essentially like anyone who's interested in the transportation planning process, anyone who has a stake in transportation, which I would argue is pretty much everyone. But especially, I think we're really looking at how can we better reach and better include the communities that we haven't heard from in the past and that we're not hearing from now. So really trying to find those gaps and then target our efforts there.
Thanks.
I'll jump in another question. So what does MAPC do with respect to public engagement? It would be helpful, to work with them, especially maybe in planning public events, because I think some people because of the name of the organization, think that we probably do the kind of work that MAPC does, and I'm thinking if we both went out together, or somehow meshed our two outreach programs, we would we would appeal to more people, because they would see what they were expecting, if not from us, then from MAPC.
Yeah, that's a great point, and certainly it's a confusion that we run up against a lot when we're talking to people. I think so. I guess to answer the first part of your question, my understanding of MAPC's community engagement program is that it's a little bit more project focused than ours is, because a lot of MAPC's work is a little bit more project focused, whereas our engagement program, I would say, is really aimed at trying to build relationships and engage people in transportation planning writ large, not necessarily just for like a particular study or for the tip or for one thing, but really to equip people to get involved and share information that can help us direct kind of all of the work that we're doing. So we have, I think, a more of a regional focus in a lot of ways, and a lot of the engagement that I hear about from MAPC is more around like specific plans or projects that the staff is doing with municipalities. I do think they do some stuff on the regional scale, but I think that's one area of difference. I will say though that I totally agree with you. I think there's a lot of value in collaborating, just because of our shared region and the nature of our work in regional planning, and obviously public perceptions that we are a very similar agency to them. So it's something that we've definitely been working on over the last couple of years. I meet regularly with their engagement staff. We share resources and best practices about engagement pretty regularly. We haven't planned any like public facing events together, but that's definitely something that we could look into. I definitely see the value there.
Yeah, and no, I'm getting a better picture of how they approach things, and because essentially what we want to do is kind of complement and maybe even provide people who can give them input on what they're doing at whatever scale they're doing it, so. But it's good to know that you're having conversations with them. So as long as we're communicating with them, we'll figure out how to move forward in a way that works for both organizations. So cool. So I have taken a screenshot of the questions, and I'll get back to you with some answers. And I'll prove to you that I'm really going to get back to you when I say that, because if I have time in this meeting, I'll give you the answers to the questions that you asked, be it at the last meeting when we were talking about the community planning lab. I'll also email them to you, but I want to run through them at the meeting just to see how other people may feel about those answers. So any other?
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Anyone can feel free to email me reactions, responses to this afterwards as well.
Yeah, definitely. And as she was saying, you can email her, just send email directly to Stella. You don't have to like go through me in order to pass them along to Stella. If you CC me though, I'm always curious, but by no means, a requirement. So anything else? Anyone else on this? Okay. All right. So we're tracking pretty well. So we'll go to August meeting and field trip. And we're not planning on having an August meeting unless people want to. If there's a burning desire to have it, and let me rephrase that. If there's just a desire to have it, we'll have a meeting. It would be nice if there was a quorum, but it doesn't have to be a quorum. And we are also considering having a field trip. Did you get any responses, Stella?
Yeah, I got a couple of responses. Well, let me say, I got 5 responses to the survey I sent out in advance about a field trip. I can share them now, although the chart looks kind of crazy on my screen, so I can just read through them. But we had 2 people say don't hold a field trip or would not attend a field trip. We had 1 person vote for a tour of the Massport Conley shipping terminal. We had 1 person vote for tour another partner agency facility in the Boston region, and the write-in response there was an idea for the MBTA Operations Control Center. And then we had 1 vote for visit a future TIP project location. And the 2 write-in suggestions there were Rutherford Ave or McGrath Highway. And then we had a couple of other sort of general comments. 1 person said, I liked all of these ideas, so if someone is strongly advocating for any of them, I would support them. And then another saying, if we don't do a field trip, that's okay. So I think we have some mixed sentiment, but it sounds like folks generally would kind of go with the flow, whatever we decide.
All right. Well, let me just add to that, Tain and I have worked with Sarah Lee initially for another purpose, but as a result, we do have another planned tour of the Conley Tunnel. I'm sorry, port. At another visit to the port on the 9th of August at 10 o'clock. And so that's open to 15 people. And so at this point, I think we have 13 or 12 more slots, so if any members of the advisory council want to participate, try to let me know before the next board meeting, MPO board meeting, which I think is going to be next week. And because then we'll announce it to the members of the board, and I'd like to just tell them that there are 15 minus X slots available.
You said August 9th at what time?
August 9th, a Friday at 10 o'clock. And the tour lasts about 90 minutes. That'd be 10 to noon. And they are wanting us to be at the Fish Pier, Pier 12 or is it 21? I'll see the details, but they want us to be there on time. So I would say aim for getting to the Fish Pier like at 9:30. So I would say it's probably a 3-hour affair, just to be on the safe side.
And I went on that last year and it was really interesting. And so for that reason, I like the idea of the MBTA control center. That sounded really interesting. Or any other field trips. I like field trips, so I would vote for a field trip.
All right.
So that one that you're talking about is not our substitute field trip. It's just one that's happening.
It's just when it's happening, right, right,
Okay.
right. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
so
yeah.
anyway, I would be into one,
Yeah.
Wherever.
Yeah, what could be interesting about the control center is I know that they're at least they're planning on rebuilding the control center. It's already pretty impressive. I mean, I saw it at this point probably about 15, 17 years ago. I mean, it was impressive then. I'm sure there've been some upgrades to me, but maybe I think it's a worthwhile trip, but I
Yeah, it was really
guess
interesting.
you've been, Franny?
Oh, wait, I was talking, oh, no, not the
The
MBTA.
OCC,
The OCC,
The port was really interesting.
yeah.
way back in the
yeah,
day, I went,
What was
What?
that, AC?
no, I'm sorry, Franny was talking.
No, you go on.
No, I was gonna say, way back in the day, I used to have to stop at the OCC every day for a radio.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I also reminded it would be interesting to visit like 1 to 3 places where they're dispatch centers for like the ride, and then for a couple of towns, maybe more in an RTA region of our MPO. And so, yeah.
Right. Well, I think the MBTA bus dispatch is also at 48 High Street. I know that's not what you're talking about, Franny, but if you did want to see that kind of a dispatch, on a larger scale, that
Well,
could
I
probably,
think it's useful to see the ones that's for the paratransit type.
right. Right.
Anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how to go
I'm open
about
to anything.
that one, but I'll see, maybe if we can find out more. So, okay, well, I think I'll work with Stella and we'll see to what extent we can pull something together. I guess it's just gonna take place in August. It gives us like a month to try to pull something together and determine what the critical mass is for doing this. And I mean, if the agency or the entity that we want to visit, doesn't care what the number is, and we can just kind of schedule things that people can go on their own. That's a pretty low bar. If it is something substantially more complex, then I think we'll just need to make sure that we have the critical mass to do it. And I don't think, given the sentiment of folks, that they'll go with anything from nothing to whatever. It may very well be that, and we'll let you know. I would say by what do you say is a good time to let people know, Stella? Maybe August 1.
Yeah, let's
yeah.
figure it out by the end of the month. That seems
Okay.
good.
All right, good enough. So with that, let's talk about advisory council elections. So we do the vote in September. No, it's October. So we do the nominations in September, and the vote in October. And these things could always sneak up on us. And so we need to put together a committee this month, so that committee can have its meetings, and can make presentations at least of those who are going to be nominated, by September. So, who wants to be on the committee?
You can stick my name on there, Len.
What's that?
You can stick my name on there.
Okay, all right, AC.
I'm willing to work a little bit with it, but I'm stepping back from being the vice chair, doing some work with Stella before I end
Right.
about membership, but I'm not gonna run again. But
Right,
I could help out.
All right.
with
All right.
Looking
So
for somebody.
So we have 2. Anyone else? Well, you don't have to commit now, but if you're at all interested, please let Stella know. Sooner rather than later. And I would say Franny and AC, we need to put together when you're going to meet, and then we can send that out to members so that if they want to join that meeting, they can. I will certainly join the meeting to lay out what the role entails, and what my thinking is in general. And so we can take it from there. So So of course you schedule things for when works for you because you're the committee, and I will do my best to attend, or at least part of it, to lay out things, and if I can't attend, then I can certainly send you written material. Okay, so thanks for stepping up. All right.
No worries.
Okay, all right, so I think we can move on at this point to chair's report. So we just had one MPO meeting, since our last advisory council meeting, and the highlight of it was really we released the UPWP. So as it is with the MPO, this is a frenetic February, increasingly frenetic March and April and May, and then everything goes out for draft review, and then we're kind of done as we sign off on the documents. So that's why there's very little to report on that end. So what I'm going to do now is circle back to the questions that Stella asked regarding the excuse me, I'm trying to pull up a document and talk at the same time, regarding the community lab. So there were about 6 questions. I don't have much in terms of responses. So, and we're a little bit ahead of schedule. So I'm just going to run through my responses, and hopefully that will jog people's thoughts, and either they can add to it now or they can add to it later on. So the question was, what key information about the MPO participation in regional planning should we include? I suggested the criteria that we use to score projects. And I can see this in email to Stella. Okay. And based on your own experience engaging in the planning process, what type of content and education has been the most helpful? I'm almost tempted to ask, what do you think I'm going to say? Anyone? What's my favorite document to read? What's my favorite part to read of the LRTP?
Needs assessment.
The needs assessment. It is by far you learn so much about transportation and transit in the whole region, and what the MPO is doing, what the staff is doing. It's just such a bounty of information that that's why I really press us to read it as much as possible, and why I'm so anxious to see it. So next is, what metrics do you suggest we look at to measure the success of the program? And I suggest the quality of the input provided by the participants. I know that's a little wishy-washy, Stella, and particularly coming from me, I know it's not like a hardcore number that you can like look at, and give an average or a mean or a mode, but that's the best I can come up with for now, especially since it's going to be the first iteration of it, and what next one is, what would your ideal outcomes look like in attendance at or participation in advisory council meetings, and perhaps we can create a subcommittee of the advisory council for those who have completed their program, and their level of participation and contribution in that subcommittee could serve as a metric to measure success. Essentially what I really want to see us do is develop a long-term relationship with the participants to the extent that they want to have that long-term relationship. We can't force them, but once they have completed the program, instead of being like, okay, well, thank you very much, you're on your own, it's like create a home for them. And if that home is in the advisory council, I'd be delighted. So that's my ideal outcome. And the last one is, what elements would you like to see in future years as we look at expanding the program beyond the pilot? One possible idea is development of solid proposals for the UPWP studies for the participants, and to the extent they really do come up with a solid proposal, it could maybe be evaluated a little higher than others. So all other things being equal, their idea would have to be qualitatively good, but to the extent that if the quality matched other proposals, then since they participate in the program, you can maybe give them a little added notch. And the last one is involving participants in advisory council meetings and or having advisory council members participate in one of the or more of the lab sessions. So the point is that it is part of the lab. They could either come to the advisory council meeting if the timing works out, or we could meet with them, either as part of a formal lab event, or maybe something informal. So those are my answers to the questions that you posed last time. So.
Thank you, Len.
yeah.
That's really helpful. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, as you know, I have a vested interest in this program. I really want to see it succeed. So all right. So with that, let's see. Toggling over to another window here. That was the chair's report and old business members items. Anything?
I would just note that sometimes we've had discussions about inter-RTA transportation, and I just wanted to note that in our area, Boxborough through the MART, Montechusett Area Regional Transit, has created a fixed route that goes from Boxborough to the South Acton train station, which means it's passing from the Montechusett Regional Transit Authority to the Lowell Regional Transit Authority, which oftentimes people say that's a barrier that's hard to cross. And we had crossed it with Crosstown Connect. Anyway, so this is good to see. And so I can report as time goes on how that goes. But I
Great.
just like when this committee keeps abreast of any creative RTA solutions.
No, that's great. That's great. And one thing I've wanted us to do and just have never managed to do it is for us to talk with other advisory councils. This is tangential to what you just brought up, but it'd be one way for us to maybe keep abreast of what's going on in other MPOs. And learn from them. So. All right. Well, thanks for that new business. Or member item. Anything else? Going once, going twice. Okay, we land on adjourn. So
Make a motion to adjourn.
and
Oh,
yeah.
actually, before we adjourn, I
Yeah.
wanted to note John's comment, since Jim Nee is here, that the MWRTA also should access the South Acton train station. Absolutely. It's the more north-south in this area, the more north-south connections we make, the more important it is, the more helpful it is, because we just have east-west highways and east-west train. And it's hard for people, especially who depend on transit, to go north-south. So
Right.
I don't know, Jim, if Jim is still here for him to
Yeah.
hear that.
Well, thanks for
Maybe
pointing me
he's
to.
not.
Yeah, I don't know. No, thanks for pointing me to the chat. I hadn't seen the chat, and I see that Jim had welcome. He's willing to host us. Okay, well that becomes another place. That we could go, and the happy to host part kind of makes me excited, and I see 2 thumbs up and a heart on that one. So maybe we'll aim for that as opposed to control center. So Stella, once again, we can work with people. We can also maybe send outgoing mails with a survey or something if it seems like it's worth it to get more feedback from people. So okay, so we got one motion from AC to adjourn,
Okay, second.
a second for Franny, and folks, we're done. And so enjoy the rest of the month and the rest of the summer. We don't see you until September. All righty.
Thank you so much,
You're welcome.
everybody. Bye.
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 Thank you all.